There are two breeds of dangerous men walking around in this world. The first kind wants everyone to know it. He struts, he raises his voice, he wears his temper like a scent he sprayed on too heavy that morning. He flexes in front of strangers, needs witnesses for every act of aggression, the way a toddler needs a parent's eyes on him before he leaps off the high dive. The second kind never announces himself. My name is Nathan Reeves. I gave 11 years of my life to the United States Marine Corps. Most of it in force recon. I worked in places you will never read about in any newspaper, carried out missions that no file will ever confirm happened. And I came home from every single one of them without a parade, without a medal ceremony, without so much as a handshake from a stranger at the airport. For the past 6 years, I've sold industrial refrigeration units across the state of Indiana. I drove a beat-up '08 Silverado with a spider-webbed windshield and a transmission that groaned every time I shifted into third. I discovered my wife was cheating on me on an ordinary Thursday night while I was elbow deep in a sink full of dirty dishes. The water was nearly boiling. I could feel it cooking the skin on the back of my hands, turning them a furious shade of red. But I never reached for the cold handle. Pain has always done something for me. It clears the static. It reminds a man that he's still occupying space in the world, still upright, still functioning. Behind me, on the kitchen counter, my wife's phone lit up and buzzed against the granite. Once, twice, then the soft ping of a voice memo landing. Rachel was upstairs. I could hear the shower hissing through the old pipes, the same pipes I'd promised for months I would finally replace. I'd promised myself a lot of things over the years that never got done. I wiped my hands on the towel looped through the oven handle. It reeked faintly of mold. Everything in that house had begun to smell a little damp to me lately, a little bit like decay working its way outward from somewhere deep inside the walls. The particular odor of wood once the moisture finally wins the fight. I walked over and picked up her phone. She hadn't bothered locking it. A man's voice spilled out of the tiny speaker, filling the kitchen with a tone that was loud, self-assured, and dripping with the kind of confidence that only exists in men who've never once been genuinely tested. "Hey, gorgeous! You left your gym bag at my place again. Tell your husband you've got a late shift tomorrow. We've got some sparring to catch up on." A low, satisfied laugh followed it. The laugh of a man who had never once considered there might be a price to pay. I set the phone back down exactly where I'd found it. I stood at that sink with the tap still running and stared out the window into the backyard. The lawn was overgrown. The hummingbird feeder Rachel had bought 3 summers back still hung empty. A rusted lawn chair sat forgotten in the corner, half swallowed by weeds nobody had trimmed in months. I didn't smash anything. I didn't drive my fist through the wall. I didn't even raise my voice. What moved through me instead was something far quieter, far colder than anger. It was clarity, the exact same stillness that settles over a man in the final seconds before a breach. When the pulse slows and the entire world narrows down to a single point of focus. When Rachel came downstairs 15 minutes later, cinched into her bathrobe with her wet hair clinging to her neck, she froze in the kitchen doorway. She took one look at me standing near the counter, and something in my posture, some stillness she hadn't seen in years, made the color drain right out of her face. Her eyes dropped to her phone, then rose back to me. "You heard it," she said. Not a question, just flat statement. "Eucalyptus," I said. My own voice sounded far away, as though it were arriving from another room entirely. "That's the smell you carry now. Every time you get back from the gym." She pulled the robe tighter around her body. Her jaw locked in that particular way it always did, whenever she was gearing up to fight, instead of to apologize. I'd watched her do it more times than I could count across 13 years of marriage. "His name's Marcus," she said. "He runs the fight gym on 4th Street. A pause. "Don't you dare look at me like that, Nathan." "Like what?" "Like that. Like nothing. Like I'm not even worth getting mad at." Her voice trembled at the edges, though the defiance never wavered. That blank stare, that flat, dead look you've carried around for 6 years straight. You walk through this house like a shadow of yourself. You eat, you sleep, you stare at nothing. You're here, but you're not really here. You get what that does to somebody? Do you have any idea? I glanced at the bowl of blackening bananas sitting on the counter. The pile of mail nobody had opened in weeks. The refrigerator smudged with fingerprints neither of us had bothered wiping off in months. "So you found somebody who makes you feel alive," I said. "He actually sees me." Her voice dropped low, more honest than she'd been with me in a long time. He makes me feel like I still exist. She exhaled hard. I want out, Nathan. I've wanted out for a long time. I just never knew how to say the words. I stood there without moving for a moment.
Then I said, fine.
The word dropped into that kitchen like a rock into still water. Rachel stared at me, waiting for something more. The defiance drained out of her face, replaced by confusion, then by a wounded, disbelieving anger. That's your response? She said. I just told you I've been sleeping with another man. I told you our marriage is over and all you can say is fine. You wanted me to beg? I wanted you to feel something. Her voice cracked open completely now. Just one time. Anything at all. Yell at me. Throw a dish across the room. Cry, even. Something to prove you're still a real person and not some machine wandering around my house. I lifted my keys off the hook by the back door. I'll grab a bag and check into the Days Inn on Route 9. Tell your attorney to start drawing up papers. I stopped in the doorway. We sell the house. Split it even. That's how the law works. I left her standing there, in the mildew air of a home we had both quietly stopped living in together. 3 miles down the road, my phone started ringing. Unknown number. I answered it on speaker. Nathan. The voice matched the one from the voice memo, only louder now. Filling the whole cab of the truck, rehearsed. The voice of a man who confused volume with authority. This is Marcus. Rachel called me. She's pretty shaken up. I think you and I need to talk this through, man to man. Rain had started falling. The wipers dragged streaks of amber headlight glare across the windshield. She asked for a divorce. I said fine. Nothing else to discuss. There's still the issue of the house. His tone dropped a register. The way certain men do when they want to threaten without technically threatening. She's the one who made the down payment, her folks' money. You've been living off her paycheck for years, the way I see it. You leave with exactly what you walked in with. Nothing. Equity splits down the middle. That's the law. I don't give a damn about the law. A pause weighted with what he must have imagined was menace. I care about what's fair, and fair means you show a little respect. Come by the gym. Let's settle this face to face, unless you're the type of man who avoids that sort of thing. I checked the dashboard clock. 4:20 in the afternoon, on a Thursday. Had nowhere to be, and nothing left worth protecting. A cold hum I hadn't felt in 6 years began vibrating along my back teeth. Text me the address, I said. Iron Circle Fight Club sat wedged between a discount furniture outlet and a smoke shop, with a neon sign shaped like a fist. The letters over the entrance were sharp and crimson, engineered to look menacing. Inside it smelled like rubber flooring, bleach, and the specific sour sweat of men who trained to compete rather than to survive. I stood in the doorway a beat, letting my eyes sweep the room the way years of training had wired into me. Exits, sightlines, anyone who might pose a problem. A room always tells you who occupies it. This one told me everyone inside had learned violence strictly by the rulebook. Marcus stood at the center of the main floor, holding pads for a young student and shouting corrections about hip torque. He was younger than I'd pictured, late 20s. Built like a man who devoted the bulk of his waking hours sculpting his own body. Wide through the shoulders and narrow at the waist, skin sprayed in to catch the overhead fluorescence just right. A black belt sat around his hips with the casual pride of a man who wanted it noticed. He clocked me crossing the floor and patted his student's shoulder before swaggering over. Wide stance. Arms held a little too far from his sides. The walk of a man performing confidence for a crowd already watching him. Nathan, he said, looking down at me from a slight height advantage. Didn't think you'd actually show. You invited me, I said. Hands tucked in my jacket pockets, shoulders loose, weight even, breathing slow. What did you want to say? He made a whole production of it. Arms crossed. Voice pitched to carry to the gym members drifting closer to listen. He told me Rachel deserved the house. He called me deadweight. He tossed around phrases like, step up and be a man about it with the smugness of somebody who'd practiced the lines in a mirror. I watched the artery pulse in his neck the entire time he talked. I clocked the distance between us. 2 feet, maybe less. The math of violence is something a body learns once and keeps forever. House gets sold, I said when he finished. Split whatever's left. That's the end of it. I turned toward the exit. Take care of her. She takes her coffee black. Don't ever put sugar in it. She can't stand that. His hand landed on my shoulder. A hard grip, his fingers pressing in, the kind of touch meant to declare ownership of the moment. My body reacted before my brain gave it permission. I rotated my shoulder inward, dropped my hip, broke the grip clean, and turned to face him square. I didn't lift my hands. My expression didn't change. I just looked at him. Something shifted behind his eyes. A flicker he had no name for, because he'd never encountered it in another human being before. Not the hot posture of anger, not the wild, restless energy of a man building toward violence. Something else entirely, something cold, patient, and utterly without a ceiling. His pride yanked him back from the edge before his gut instincts could keep him there. "Open mat night," he announced to the room, recovering his grin. "Friday, come back here. 5 minutes on the mat with me. You survive without tapping and without going out, I'll wire Rachel's full share of the equity from my own business account. Buy your half out myself." He cocked his head. "You don't show or you tap inside there. You sign the papers and walk away with nothing. My attorney's terms." It was the dare of a man who believed fighting was a game that ended in trophies. I thought about Helmand Province. I thought about a black alley outside Fallujah and the noise a man makes when the life finally leaves his body. I thought about the actual cost of being built as a weapon and the far higher cost of trying to set that weapon down. And about 6 years spent convincing myself the man who came home from those places had earned the right to a quiet life and a polo shirt. "Friday," I said. My voice came out low and rough, scraped like gravel under a boot heel. No gloves. I pushed through the glass doors into the rain. Room 217 at the Days Inn smelled like decades of cigarette smoke losing a slow war against pine-scented cleaner. The mattress dipped hard in the center. The carpet had a pattern designed for the sole purpose of hiding stains. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled off my boots. The left came easy. The right took both hands, lifting my own thigh to ease the angle on the knee that had taken shrapnel outside Fallujah 11 years earlier. Fragments of metal were still lodged in there, working their slow way through cartilage, a souvenir attached to a surgery I kept putting off indefinitely. I stepped into the bathroom, ran the tap until the initial rust-colored burst cleared, cupped my hands, drank, and dry swallowed for Advil. Under the yellow bathroom light, I studied my own hands in the mirror. Thick knuckles calloused from years of running copper wire and hauling equipment. Older scars underneath told a different story. Jagged white lines closed up with whatever materials happened to be available in the moment. I was 39 years old. I hadn't been in a genuine physical confrontation since a medevac helicopter pulled me out of Ramadi. My body had become a piece of machinery, neglected and underfed for 6 straight years. A dull, grinding ache lived in my right hip. My left shoulder popped whenever I rotated it past a certain point. The knee throbbed in time with my own heartbeat, keeping count like a metronome. I dragged a chair over to the window and sat in the dark, cracking the curtain enough to watch the rain hammer the parking lot asphalt. The motel sign buzzed overhead. A moth kept slamming itself repeatedly into the glass. What struck me most, sitting there in that dim yellow light, was the absence of everything I was supposed to be feeling. No grief, no rage, no heartbreak befitting a betrayed husband, and I waited for it to arrive, and it never came. What I found instead, once I sat still enough to actually examine myself, was relief. Not the good kind, the hollow kind. The kind that surfaces when a wound you've spent years pretending doesn't exist finally tears open, and some part of you thinks at least now it's honest. For 6 years I had been performing normal life like a man following instructions written in a language he never learned to read. Rachel had wanted a civilian husband, warm, present, unburdened by whatever the war had left inside me, and I had tried my hardest to become exactly that. I shrank down the parts of myself that scared her and stretched out the parts she preferred, and what remained satisfied neither one of us, because it resembled neither one of us. My phone buzzed against the nightstand. Rachel's name lit up the cracked screen. I let it ring 4 times, listening to the plastic rattle against the laminate, before I finally answered. "You're not actually going through with this," she said. Not a question. The same tone she used whenever I left my boots by the front door. "House sells 50-50, I said. Marcus made a counteroffer. I'm considering it." "Nathan," her voice shifted, irritation thinning into something sharper underneath. "He fights competitively. He's got amateur titles. You train 6 days a week with actual professionals? You're going to walk in there and get hurt, and then I'm going to be the one dealing with the fallout, I said. Silence on the line. I'm only saying it isn't practical. Tell him I said no gloves, I said. See you Friday. I hung up and set the phone face down on the nightstand. I stood, moved the chair out of the way, and planted my bare feet shoulder-width apart in the middle of the worn carpet. I closed my eyes and stayed still a long moment. Then I dropped into a slow, deliberate squat, letting the joints crack and complain, letting the body remember exactly what it had been built for. I didn't shadow box. I didn't drill combinations. There was nothing to relearn about fighting. Fighting was never the part that needed practice. The part that needed practice, the part I'd spent 6 years working on, was choosing not to. What I did in that motel room with the rain tapping against the glass and the pine cleaner burning at the back of my throat was make peace with the man I'd spent years pretending wasn't still living somewhere inside my chest. I reached down into that locked place and let him breathe again. Friday night. The gym was packed in a way open mat nights usually weren't, which told me Marcus had been talking all week. Mostly regulars filled the room, a handful of serious grapplers with cauliflower ears and thick necks, plus a scattering of girlfriends nursing cheap beer out of plastic cups. The room carried the particular charge of a crowd expecting to watch something entertaining happen to somebody else. I walked in wearing a faded gray t-shirt, black sweatpants, bare feet, no wraps, no mouthguard, no gear bag. I moved with the slight limp that 6 years of ibuprofen maintenance had never fully resolved. The room noticed me. Conversation dipped. I looked exactly like what I was, a tired man pushing 40 with a bad knee and a face that suggested outdoor labor and early mornings and not much joy to speak of. I did not look like a man who belonged in a fight gym. That suited me fine. Looking like what you actually are is a luxury reserved for people who don't need anybody else to take them seriously. I didn't need that. Marcus was already center mat. Custom board shorts, black with crimson trim, his nickname stitched across the waistband in Gothic script, wrists freshly taped. He carried the focused, predatory energy of a man who'd spent all week mentally rehearsing this exact moment and liked what he pictured. Rachel stood near the front counter in a black top I didn't recognize, gripping a water bottle with both hands the way people hold things when they need somewhere to put their nerves. When our eyes met, she looked away first. Marcus spotted me and threw his arms wide, playing to the crowd. He actually showed up, he announced, drawing a ripple of laughter. Give the man credit for having a pulse. I stepped onto the mat and stopped 10 feet from him. The vinyl felt cool under my bare soles. 5 minutes, Marcus told the man holding a stopwatch at the edge of the mat. Then, turning back to me, want to warm up? Stretch it out? I can give you a minute or two. Start the clock, I said. The timekeeper called it. Marcus moved immediately, the way trained fighters do, closing distance with light. It's practiced footwork, hands raised in a clean guard. He was smooth, genuinely smooth, the product of thousands of drilled hours. He threw a jab to measure range. I let it land. The leather caught my left cheekbone with a sharp electric sting. My head snapped with it. A thin taste of copper spread across my tongue where my inner lip caught against my teeth. The crowd let out a collective, appreciative sound. Marcus circled right and dropped a low kick, his shin cracking against the meat of my left thigh. Deep pain, bruising from the inside out. He was planting seeds, checking whether I'd react emotionally, chase him down, leave myself exposed. I didn't move. He read my stillness as hesitation, as fear maybe, or shock. It was neither, it was calculation. He stepped forward with a right cross combination, committing his weight, trying to end things early while the crowd was warm and Rachel was watching. I slipped my head 3 inches off the center line. His glove grazed my ear, and suddenly he was inside his own punch with nothing left to connect with. Momentum dragging him forward, guard wide open, and I was already moving, not backward, straight into him. I drove the crown of my forehead into the soft tissue beneath his jaw, snapping his teeth shut with a sound like a door slamming. In the same motion, my right hand shot forward, open palm, gripping his throat not to choke, but to seize the axis of his balance. My left hand locked around his right tricep and wrenched his arm across his own center line, collapsing his structure entirely. Marcus's world tilted sideways. He'd been trained in the geometry of sport combat range, angles, the choreography of exchanging damage inside a framework of rules. He had never once been seized by the throat by a man who wasn't performing and had no intention of stopping. His nervous system registered the difference within half a second, and what followed wasn't a trained fighter making tactical choices anymore. It was pure animal panic, older than language. I hooked my right foot hard behind his left calf. His base gave out. We hit the mat together, and I drove my full weight down onto his chest on the way, not falling but driving, and the air left his lungs in a wet, compressed gasp the front row absolutely heard. I didn't posture up. I didn't throw a single punch. Punches create space. Space creates a chance to recover. I laid flat across him instead, a dense, suffocating weight, and slid my forearm across his throat with the calm, unhurried precision of a man performing a task he'd done many times before. I drove my elbow point into his sternum and let the full weight of my existence finish the rest. His hips bucked upward violently. His legs kicked. His gloves slapped against my back with the muffled, useless sound of someone knocking on a door already bolted shut. His face, the last time I looked directly at it, had turned a dark, mottled shade of purple. And every trace of the swagger he'd carried since Thursday had drained clean out of his eyes. No performance left. No audience left. Just a man running out of air, understanding for the first time the gap between sport and the real thing. He tapped the mat. I held the position. He tapped again, harder, frantic, his palm slapping vinyl in the universal signal for, "Enough, I'm done, please stop." I held it 2 more seconds. Not out of cruelty, something colder than that. I wanted him to feel the entire distance between what he thought he understood about violence and what violence truly is. I wanted him to carry that knowledge with him, to remember, the next time he looked at a quiet man and mistook silence for weakness, that the stillest room in the building is usually the one holding the most dangerous thing. Then I rolled off him and stood. Marcus lay on his side coughing, one hand pressed to his chest, the other braced against the mat, drawing ragged breaths. He was breathing the outcome I'd planned for from the start. The room had gone completely silent. Music still thumped from a corner speaker, and it felt absurd. Some upbeat track playing over the sound of a man discovering exactly where his limits were. I looked at the timekeeper. He was staring at his own phone like a man trying to verify he hadn't imagined what he'd just watched. "How long?" I asked. My breathing hadn't changed at all. My pulse had barely moved. He blinked. "For seconds," he said. I turned and walked toward the edge of the mat. Rachel stood exactly where she'd been the entire time. The water bottle sat on the floor by her feet. She'd dropped it at some point without noticing. She looked at me with an expression I had never once seen on her face in 13 years of marriage. The expression of someone encountering something they have no category for. She had spent 6 years telling me I was absent. A ghost, a shell of a man. She wanted me to feel more, to be more, to fill up the rooms of our shared life with warmth or noise or something resembling presence. And now she was looking directly at what actually lived inside me the moment I stopped performing absence, and it frightened her. I don't blame her for that. "Tell his accountant to have the wire ready by Monday," I said, walking past her. My voice stayed calm. Not a threat, just information, or I come back and handle it in person. I pushed through the glass doors. The night air met me cool and damp, carrying the smell of rain on concrete and something green drifting over from the park a couple blocks off. I stood on the sidewalk a moment, eyes shut, breathing it in. My cheekbone throbbed where the jab had landed. My thigh ached deep in the muscle from the kick. My knee kept up its usual steady complaint. I felt none of what the movies promise a man is supposed to feel in this moment. No triumph. No catharsis. No swelling music behind my ribs. What moved through me instead was a quiet, aching sadness for 13 years, and for the way time moves through a life without ever once asking permission. I felt something close to grief. Not for Rachel exactly. Not for Marcus either. But for the long stretch of ordinary days that had piled up between the man I'd been outside Fallujah, the man standing in a strip mall parking lot outside an MMA gym in Indiana. Underneath everything else, I felt like a man who had finally set down something impossibly heavy. I climbed into the truck, started the engine, let the heater run until the windshield cleared, Then I drove. No destination, no plan. Just the highway, the rain. And the particular silence belonging to a man who has settled every account and no longer owes anyone anything at all. There's a version of this story where Nathan is the hero. The music swells, the crowd erupts, and Rachel realizes exactly what she threw away and comes sprinting into the parking lot after him. Where the violence reads as vindication, and the quiet man's strength finally earns him the recognition he always deserved, that is not this story. This story lives in the space between a man who performs strength for an audience and a man who simply is what he is, whether anyone's watching or not. One of those men needs you to see him. The other one never asks. The quietest man in the room isn't silent because he has nothing worth saying. He's silent because he already said everything that mattered to the only audience whose opinion he ever needed, and that audience was always himself. People will ask later what changed that night. They'll want a tidy answer, some line about closure, about a man reclaiming his pride, about justice finally served in a strip mall parking lot under a buzzing neon sign. The truth is less satisfying than that. Nothing was reclaimed. Nothing was settled in the way people mean when they use that word. A marriage ended the way most marriages end, not in one dramatic evening, but in the slow accumulation of 1,000 small absences that finally added up to a single, unavoidable sentence. The fight didn't undo any of that. It didn't rewrite 13 years. It didn't hand me back the version of myself that existed before deployments and desert nights and things that don't make it into any official report. What it did was simpler and harder to explain to anyone who hasn't lived it. It let something breathe for 4 seconds that had been holding its breath for 6 years. That's all. No music, no parade. Just air moving through a place that had been sealed shut for a long time. And a man walking out into the rain afterward, lighter by exactly that much. Somewhere out there tonight, there's another man like Marcus, loud, sculpted, certain of his own dominance because no one has ever shown him otherwise. And somewhere else there's another man like I used to be 6 years ago, sitting quietly at a kitchen table, absorbing insult after insult, mistaking his own silence for weakness, because everyone around him has told him that's exactly what it is. It isn't. Silence is not the absence of strength. It is strength that has learned patience. It is a loaded weapon, choosing deliberately, again and again, not to fire, right up until the moment it finally has to. I never went back to that gym. I never spoke to Marcus again. The wire transfer landed in the account by Monday morning, exactly as promised, and Rachel's lawyer handled the rest of it with the flat procedural efficiency of people paid to make heartbreak into paperwork. I signed what needed signing. I moved into a small apartment above a hardware store on the edge of town, the kind of place with thin walls and a view of a parking lot, and for the first time in 6 years, the quiet in my own head didn't feel like something I had to apologize for. I still drive that same beat-up Silverado. The windshield's still cracked. The transmission still groans in third gear. Some things don't need fixing so much as they need accepting. And I've gotten better, slowly, at telling the difference between the two. I think about Fallujah less than people might expect, and more than I let on. I think about the version of me that existed in that alley, the version of me that existed at that kitchen sink with the water running too hot, and I've come to understand they were never really two different men. It's just one man, learning, over and over, in different rooms, at different volumes. What he was always capable of and choosing, almost every single time, not to use it, almost. That word carries more weight than people realize. It's the entire difference between a man who is dangerous and a man who has simply decided, for reasons of his own, to stay quiet about it. I know which one I am. I've always known. The only difference now is that I'm no longer the only one who does.